Hello, Lauren. Thank you for. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got something on my face. Bug flying around here. Hello,
Hey,
Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing pretty great. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for joining us here on Important Call. So, you're another member of the Berkeley Black Students Union. I've had a
Mhm.
long conversation with your colleague, Blake, who really shocked me with some of the examples of racism that he says he's experienced on the Berkeley campus, even, which, of
Yeah,
course, for people like me from outside the States, we imagine Berkeley as this sort of haven of progressive liberal values, but that's not really what Blake described to me. What's your experience been like?
right. I agree with Blake 100%. I often say that UC Berkeley is kind of like this miniature version of the bigger systems at large in America, just reflected on the school campus. There's a lot of racism here, microaggressions, and not just from individual students, but student organizations like frats and things like that. And since I've been here, there have been a lot of incidents and kind of high profile incidents where um, it's been, they go out into things like the Daily Cow, which is the campus wide newspaper. But no one has ever really held, or no one has ever, since I've been here, been held accountable for the things that happen, like the different nooses that are hung up around campus, or racial slurs and things like that. Like a campus where I forget where it is, but where the SIE frat, where they were caught on video chanting that racist chant, and immediately the president of the school, or whatever you call it, he disbanded the frat and he expelled the students who were responsible. He took really swift action, but UC Berkeley fails time and time again to show that type of support for the Black community at Cal.
Okay, I'm just going to turn off my camera because we're getting it. The connection's breaking up a little bit. I'm still going to be here and
Okay.
listening just to save some bandwidth rather.
Oh,
I mean, one of the really distressing examples he mentioned were these effigies of someone of a black person being hung whilst wearing a T-shirt that said with the "I can't breathe" slogan, which of course comes from the Mike Brown incident. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting which incident is
Eric
that?
Garner.
Eric Garner. I'm very sorry. Um, the Eric Garner incident, and and stuff like that, which he said there's also been very little investigation, almost like the campus wasn't taking it very seriously.
Right.
Um, Another thing he said is he felt that, the sort of the student the faculty was very very white, and the student body was very very white, and that there was no real effort to sort of reach out to black students and make them feel more welcome, or and try and sort of correct that imbalance. Is that
Mhm.
you've got the same impression?
Yeah, I feel the same way. We've confronted the chancellor about the fact that there's about 3% or less than 1,000 Black students on this campus, where the Black population in California is 7%. So it's not reflected at this institution, kind of like the poster school for the UC system, I guess. A public institution that's supposed to really serve the people of California. Um, and it's really saddening. It's saddening, the response, which is no response. We get uh, we get task forced. They try to make things more bureaucratic or try to shift the responsibility onto someone else, and it just has made things super clear that the Black experience on this campus is not a priority. And we say that we are in a state of emergency because we really are in a state of emergency when you you have to try to study and get through school at this institution, which is a very challenging institution, right? So you have to deal with everything that comes with the academics, and then you look at all across the country, and your people are being killed, and their murderers are being set free, right? That has an effect on you, and a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people don't understand how a lot of my Black friends have to have taken incompletes in classes. You know what I mean? They can't focus, they can't study when finals are here. We're going to counseling. We have anxiety. That's a real thing that really manifests itself and we're just not supported. We're just not supported.
Hold on a sec. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, and you traveled to Baltimore just recently, specifically to take part in the protest there following Freddy Grey's death, Freddy Grey's murder. How long were you there for? What was it like?
I was there from Friday until Tuesday, and it was a very empowering trip, as well as I was just deeply aware the whole time of everything that was happening. And I went because, one, I wanted to participate. I felt as if I wasn't doing enough, that I should be doing more. And a lot of people feel that way, and that contributes to the anxiety that I have. And the second thing was the anxiety. I couldn't focus in school. It was to the point where I would shake, like I would be able to cry. I would walk around. The best way I can explain it is walking around 24/7 and trying to maneuver life, you know, in a normal way, you know, and get everything done, but kind of just feeling like you can just break down at any second, just feeling like you can break down at any second. So I saw the opportunity to go, and I went, and it was really amazing. And another reason that I went is because, of course, the media is focused on the riots, right? The media is focused on the result of years and years of kind of police brutality on that community, and just no investment into the communities. And I knew that there were peaceful things happening. I knew that there were peaceful things happening. So I just went to document that because news outlets weren't going to document that. But
have you got a blog or something where I can read your documentation of that, or is there a place I can read or see that documentation? I'd be very interested.
Not yet. I got back and had to get right into studying, but I'm gonna make that within the next few days because I have a lot of pictures and videos and everything. But
fantastic.
The first day that I got out there, I kind of went by myself. It was kind of just a spur of the moment type thing. But I went, I flew into DC, I caught a train and had to catch a megabus to get to Baltimore. And I get to City Hall, and there's thousands of people there. And they each have their turn speaking on the microphone. And one of the most powerful things I saw right off the bat was, I'm sure you've heard that the rival gangs are actually coming together. They're coming together to try to protect their communities, you know, because they see that the police is not. And I'm from South Central Los Angeles, right? I'm from South Central Los Angeles. And my community is kind of riddled with gang violence and gangs everywhere. And so in my mind, that never happens because that doesn't happen in LA. The last time gangs got together in LA was in the 92 riots. That was April of 92. What is that, like 23 years later? You know, that was before I was alive. So that, just seeing that and them hugging one another, and it wasn't gang signs anymore. Everyone was throwing up the Black Power fist, you know what I mean? So that just speaks to the severity and the urgency of the situation. And another thing is the youth out there. Now, when I say youth, I mean 6 and 7-year-old little boys and girls. They were leading the chants as we marched from City Hall. They were on the big horns that was bigger than them, bigger than their heads. They were holding up horns bigger than their heads. And no justice, no peace, and justice for Freddy Grey. And it was beautiful to see, but then you realize that these babies, these 6 and 7-year-old babies, like, they know exactly what we're fighting for. They know what we're fighting for. They know who we're fighting against. They know this messed up situation of our communities. They understand it as 6 and 7-year-old. They have a clear knowledge of what justice is, and they know that injustice is being served right now. And although it was really warming to see when you realize that these babies know injustice already, they understand it, it gets you down. It really gets you down. But the curfew was actually lifted while I was there, but for the first couple of days it wasn't lifted. But I can tell you that the National Guard, the police, they all were there the entire time while the rally was peaceful, and then we marched, and they're all around on horses, helicopters hovering and everything. But there was no instance of violence the entire time I was there. And then I would go home before curfew because I'm from out of state. I don't want to get thrown in a Baltimore jail. But as soon as I get back home or where I was staying out there, reports of police macing people and dragging people and just brutalizing people would start flowing in. So it became so clear that the curfew, now that the riots are not happening anymore, the curfew has become an excuse to brutalize people. The curfew that the mayor put in place herself. And it was just sickening. It's sickening. It's disgusting to me. And then pictures and videos start to surface, and it was just horrible. It was horrible to see that. But then,
so to clarify, when you were taking part in the protests during the day, you saw no violence from either side at any stage.
No violence at any stage. No violence at either side at any stage.
After curfew, you would hear about police violence towards.
After curfew.
Yeah. It's just I just feel like commenting that, I was in Egypt recently following in 2011 and 2012, and always at moments when there was the height of sort of revolutionary tension, when the deep state felt most threatened is when it would bring in the curfew, and you would hear exactly the same stories, or tear gas instead of pepper spray, but essentially the same kind of tactics, which is there's one of the people I've spoken to was Professor Gerald Horn, who's a historian from Houston University, and in our conversation we spent a lot of time looking at the link between this sort of overseas imperial policy that the US follows and racism at home, or vice versa, that racism at home prepares the US to go abroad and support tyranny and violence abroad. Is that something that was on the minds of people in Baltimore at all, or was it very locally focused?
It was more so locally focused, but it not just locally as in like we're just focusing on Freddy Grey, but it was more so about our problems here, like in America right now. But I'm positive that, that's running through everyone's mind as well. Like, America has been this way, imperialistic, racism, they're colonizers, they've killed millions of people, genocide to the native population. And I say this, there's no way, the system that is in place is there for a reason. And all of these politicians, the police force, they're all situated within this system because there's no way that a country could do what it does to its people and not expect an uprising from its people. And that's why the police force is so militarized in America. You know what I mean? Because everything is going as it can be expected to go. You can't do this and expect people not to riot. You can't kill people and hold no one accountable and expect people not to riot. So that's why people are met with the type of military force that they are met with. Even on the UC Berkeley campus, the rifles that they have, the guns that they have, how protesters are met with armored dispersal vehicles. We had a march
at a university campus. On the university campus, they're using armored vehicles and assault rifles.
No. So they have rifles here, but the armored vehicles is more like Berkeley Police Department, Oakland Police Department. But I mean, when you rally and you march and you start on campus and then you start to march through Berkeley and then you approach Oakland, we had an extremely peaceful rally and march on December 4th, right? We were extremely peaceful. There was no damage of property or anything. And for the record, I don't consider damage of property as violence. I don't consider that violence. That may be destructive, but that's not violent like a police officer.
I think that's a very important distinction.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the media makes that distinction, or are they?
No, the media does not make that distinction. But I mean, what that's to be expected in a country that values property over lives. That's expected in a country that values property over lives. But like I said, we had a peaceful protest that started on campus, and as we marched through Berkeley, we were approaching a street, and then you just see the armored vehicles, you see all the cops, you see the cops on bikes to meet us there. You know what I mean? And it's just like, wow. It's just like, wow, this school is supposed to be a emblem of free speech and being liberal and progressive, but it's not like that at all. I've been here for 4 years. It's not like that at all.
One of the other things that's come up in my discussion is there's been this idea presented that, you know, America is, as a foreigner, you're always presented with this idea of America is this essentially progressive place. The United States is this essentially progressive project upon which racism and slavery is this abhorrent stain, a sort of aberration from the norm. But what's happened in some of my interviews is that's been questioned. You know, is it more a case that the United States this historian Gerald Horne phrases it that, you know, the United States was set up to establish slavery. The state police grow out of slave patrols. Essentially, the U.S. state has always been a conservative and reactionary force, and this sort of myth of the liberal founding fathers is just entirely window dressing. Do you have a little bit more faith than that, or are you equally disadvantaged?
No, I don't have a bit more faith in that, because you had slavery, then you had segregation, and then Jim Crow, or either Jim Crow and then segregation, and then you know we had to fight for our civil rights. But now the new slavery is the prison industrial system. That's just a new form of slavery. You see how cop interactions with people of color, not just black men and not just black women, but even our brown sisters and brothers. You know what I mean? Like, they feed that system, that extremely privatized prison system, for labor. That's what it is.
Previously, there's also been the use of chain gangs, so they wouldn't even be in the prison system. They would literally be out building the roads, working on fields and stuff, doing the same labor that slaves had previously done. Now it's more internal to the prison in manufacturing and so forth. But in terms of the current sort of the Black Lives Matter campaign, one question I've been asking everyone is, do you think this is a case where there's an increase in police brutality, or do you think it's just becoming more visible because people are more and more often using camera phones to capture it? And if it's the latter, does that mean that there's some reason to be hopeful that something's going to change?
I kind of think it's a little bit of both. I think on one end, it's been happening. But I think we're into that. We're further into that, I guess, technology age where people are getting this stuff on camera, and people are waking up. You know, they're waking up their conscience. So before, you might be kind of scared, you know, to videotape what a police officer is doing. But now people are more aware of the systems at play, you know, so they will record, even if it means getting kind of backlash, I guess, or challenging an officer. But then on the other hand, I believe that this stuff is probably happening more often as well, because cops see that there are no consequences. They think that you can really just murder a person of color and walk, because it's happened. It's happened so many times before. When there's overwhelming evidence that someone has been murdered or a crime has been committed against someone, they say the same things. I feared for my life. I thought he had a gun, when there's no gun found. You know what I mean? So I believe that they think that the police really think that they're invincible, but they're being supported by this system to believe so.
Well, there's a great comparison. Some people have pointed out, you know, that a lot of white people seem more upset about the damage to property than the damage to Freddy Grey's neck. And in fact, the kid who smashed, the teenager who smashed a police car during one of the protests has not been granted, but had higher bail set for him than the cops charged with murdering Freddy Grey, and may actually end up serving longer time if he's convicted.
Right.
On that note, one thing I've also been asking about, are you aware of the couple of comments from David Simon that have come out, the creator of The Wire? He's very important for people like me who know nothing about Baltimore except what they saw on The Wire. And when we heard that Baltimore was, up in arms, a lot of us were looking to him as a sort of, someone described him as a translator for the white middle class.
Right.
He's made a couple of comments along the lines of, if you can't protest without a brick in your hand, you should go home, and let the peaceful protesters speak. What's your reaction to that?
There's just a disconnect, because this is a shared experience amongst Black folks. Slavery is something that we all are connected to in one way or another, and people who say that, they don't understand how people can be so angry. They don't understand the deep connections that we all have to one another, and seeing this injustice is being committed against your community. At first, I'll tell you myself, I was like that as well. I was like, these people are they're destroying property and blah blah blah. But it wasn't so much about save the property. It was more so about making, kind of like delegitimizing peaceful protests in the media's eyes. But as I've grown and so many more of these instances begin to happen, you notice that that's exactly what the media wants. Like, even if riots and stuff were not happening, I don't think they would be covering peaceful protests. You know what I mean? So I don't demonize it. This is just our natural reaction to be angry.
There's a good argument to be made that there would be no sort of national or global focus on events in Baltimore if the protests had remained sort of peaceful vigils and holding candles. One thing that I've found interesting is, as well, as the number of white people quoting Martin Luther King to Black people in this period, which is something that I've seen sort of stick in people's craw a bit as well. And I think it's interesting to note that at the time he wasn't seen as a unifying peacemaking figure. He was seen as a rabble-rouser. He was seen as a troublemaker and generating conflict. And there was violence at the edge of his movement. There was or property damage and rowdy behavior at the at the edge of the civil rights movement. It would happen on the same days as big marches and so forth. And at the time, that's what the media focused on. It focused on that as a lot of the examples of them as driving conflict and causing riots. I wonder, to your mind, is there much? Has this event caused you to sort of reflect on the way history is told and the way the history of race relations is told in the United States?
Yeah, definitely. But I learned a long time ago that our history wasn't told to the fullest. It was told to the extent that it supported and made American history look good. It looked like, oh, we overcame, we triumphed. But I mean, like you said, they murdered Martin Luther King. The government murdered Martin Luther King Jr. You know what I mean? And people, like you just said, there was violence towards the end, right? But there's just this the status quo image of Martin Luther King, as the only reason he achieved all this is because he was peaceful and blah blah blah. But it's like, look at what they endured. You know what I mean? They had dogs sicked on them. They were beaten. They had water hose. But it's not about, look what they withstood from the police. It's more about, look at them being peaceful and not damaging things. You know what I mean? So like you said, it's all about how history is told, but people have to dig a little deeper to really see to really learn everything. And that's something else that I've learned people are not willing to do. People are not willing to get out there and do the research for themselves. And at this day and age where everything is so accessible to your fingertips because of the internet, ignorance is no longer an excuse. And when people come to me, and personally, when people come to me and they want to know more about this, and that, they want me to prove something or they want me to send them an article, I won't do it. My job is not to send you an article about why I'm angry or why we need justice. That's your job to get out there and learn.
Well, I will ask you to send me the article you're going to write about your trip to Baltimore when it's done, in defiance of that. Look, I've really enjoyed talking with you so far. I wonder if there's anything else in particular you want to add before we wrap this up.
I think that the people who call for peaceful protests, or the people who try to just demonize anything that's going on in response to the killings, these murders, I just urge them to really just think, you know what I mean? Like, think about how something like this, seeing your people murdered and seeing justice never brought and families being torn apart, lives uprooted, just think about the impact that can have on the psychology of someone, you know what I mean? On their mind state. Shit, that's enough to drive someone crazy. If you ask me, that's enough to drive someone crazy. It's enough to make me want to drop out of school, you know what I mean? So instead of looking down at the reaction of people, you have to think about what's causing this. And you can't just take everything for face value that the news tells you or that the police department or these judicial systems tell you, because since the beginning, they have not been set up to protect Black people or people of color in general, you know? So you can't just take everything at face value. You know, you have to do a little bit more research. You have to think a little bit more critically about the things that are going on. Yeah.
Well, of course, the vast majority of these protests are peaceful, but those protesters get criticized for the actions of a minority, which of course is an example of using collective responsibility, which is, you know, one of the most basic forms of racism there is, where you hold a whole ethnic group or a whole group responsible for the actions of a minority within it. And it also seems conveniently to forget, you know, when white college kids do greater levels of property damage because there's a pumpkin festival on, or because they're drunk after winning a football game or losing a football game, or just sort of random behavior, which tends to get sort of written off as minor sort of boys will be boys, you know, shenanigans or something like that. Whereas here, there's a real tendency to view the Black protest as a mob and, you know, to try and criminalize it, which, you know, which has deep roots in, of course. That one thing I should ask you about before you go is, I mean, do you want to talk about your relationship, your interaction with, you know, sort of authorities beyond the Black Lives Matter and Berkeley experience? I mean, is living in America as a young woman of color, you know, what's an experience you think would be surprising to someone like me from outside?
An experience that would be surprising. I mean, I myself have not had too many run-ins. I mean, I personally have not had any run-ins with the law. I mean, I got stopped one time for crossing a double yellow line, and the man called. It was just me in my car, and the man called backup. So, I mean, I thought that was kind of unnecessary. But I mean, growing up,
I know you look pretty scary.
Yeah, growing up as a Black child, where I grew up, you grow up not liking the police, kind of fearing the police. You know what I mean? Freddy Grey ran when he saw the police. Shit, that's not an incident that just happened to Freddy Grey. He's not the only person who runs when he sees police. So many people run when they see police, because the relationship between police and Black people have not always been in the favor of Black people, whether you are guilty of something or you're innocent. But now it's to the point where, like, I don't fear police anymore. You know, like I have so much anger inside of me that it's kind of just like when I see an officer, it's just like what are you gonna do? I'm aware that I could lose my life at any second. You know what I mean? And I really believe that I could lose my life at any second. I feel more in danger when I'm near or around police than any other time. You know what I mean? But they're the ones who are put here to protect us. So it's just kind of like, just think about like what type of life that is to live when you feel more afraid for your life when you're around police than when you're not. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking to you. Thanks for joining us on an important call.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know when this article comes out.
Alrighty. Thank you.